kwa bidii na moyo mkunjufu, na kwamba nitawatendea haki watu wote kwa mujibu wa sheria, mila na desturi za Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania bila woga, upendeleo, huba wala chuki.
Tanzania's 2025 election wasn't just another vote, it was a turning point. The African Union congratulated President Samia Suluhu Hassan on her victory, then in the same breath expressed deep regret over the deaths that followed. That single sentence said everything. The AU knew the celebration was stained with blood. Tanzania, once a model of calm, suddenly looked unstable, its democracy cracking under the pressure of power. The protests, the arrests, the censorship, they weren't isolated events. They were symptoms of a system that has forgotten accountability. For decades, the AU has been accused of protecting leaders more than people. But this time, it couldn't hide the truth. Africa's most trusted institutions are now being tested by one of its most trusted nations. The real question isn't who won the election. It's whether Africa still dares to call a lie what it is. Let's find out. You know that eerie calm before a storm? The one where the air feels heavy, as if the world itself knows something's about to break? That's exactly what Africa felt when the African Union released its official statement congratulating President Samia Suluhu Hassan on her re-election in 2025. On paper, it was a typical diplomatic message, polite, predictable, laced with the language of unity. But between those carefully chosen words, something didn't sit right. The statement deeply regretted the loss of life during post-election unrest. And in African politics, that phrase isn't an afterthought. It's a confession whispered through official channels, a way of saying, we see the fire, but we can't call it arson yet. Tanzania wasn't supposed to be here. For decades, it stood as the quiet proof that stability was possible on African soil. No coups, no imploding democracies, no power-hungry generals, just calm transitions and a legacy built on Julius Nyereri's dream of unity. But after this election, that legacy trembled. Streets that once echoed with laughter and market chatter were now filled with chants of protest. Young people, many voting for the first time, spilled into the streets, waving flags, demanding answers. Then came the gunfire. Videos surfaced online showing police beating civilians, smoke curling up from burning tires, and journalists being dragged from the crowds. The Tanzania that the world once praised for peace was suddenly bleeding in silence.
We have also received information that mass graves are being dug all over towns across Tanzania, including in Arusha, Mwanza, mass graves in Dar es Salaam, Geita, Mbeya, mass graves in Songwe, Mara, Kitavi, and Moshi.
When the AU congratulated Samia, it was like applauding at a funeral. The sound felt wrong. African citizens across social media didn't hold back. "You congratulate while we bury our brothers," one Tanzanian activist wrote. The statement was supposed to calm tensions, but it only deepened suspicion. Because when power and tragedy share the same stage, neutrality starts to look like betrayal. Still, let's not forget the complexity here. The AU was walking a tightrope. It couldn't alienate Tanzania, a crucial player in East Africa's stability, yet it couldn't ignore the cries echoing from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma. Diplomacy in Africa isn't clean. It's survival disguised as politeness. And yet, that survival often comes at the cost of truth. Behind closed doors, AU officials debated fiercely, some urging a stronger condemnation, others warning against Western-style interference. It was the age-old African paradox: protect sovereignty or protect citizens. But you could feel something different this time. Across Africa, the usual apathy was missing. From Nairobi to Lagos, people were paying attention because everyone knew what this moment meant. If Tanzania's democracy could bend under pressure, then no country was truly safe from its own shadows. So when the AU said it was monitoring the situation closely, it wasn't just an observation. It was a silent acknowledgement that something sacred was at stake. This wasn't merely about Tanzania's elections anymore. It was about Africa's soul, its integrity, its ability to choose its own path without tearing itself apart. And that leaves us with one question. If the African Union congratulated Samia Suluhu Hassan with one hand but mourned her victims with the other, what truth did its own observers actually see when they looked closer at Tanzania's election? The truth didn't explode in headlines. It slipped out in a document written in the careful, measured tone of diplomacy, the kind that sounds harmless until you actually read between the lines. The African Union Election Observation Mission released its report, and in that neat bureaucratic phrasing lay a quiet earthquake. It said Tanzania's election did not comply with AU democratic principles. 7 words, but enough to crack open the illusion of peace that Dar es Salaam had been selling to the world. That sentence hit like a cold wind. Because let's be honest, the AU rarely says things like that about its own members. Usually the reports are soaked in soft praise, peaceful conduct, commendable participation, minor logistical challenges. This time, though, the gloves were off. Observers documented intimidation at polling stations, ballot boxes that arrived sealed but suspiciously heavy, and opposition rallies blocked under security concerns. There were accounts of journalists being harassed, election monitors being denied access, and regions where turnout mysteriously dropped by half. For ordinary Tanzanians, the AU's statement was both vindication and heartbreak. Vindication, because it confirmed what they already knew, that the election had been choreographed, not contested. Heartbreak, because validation doesn't erase blood. You can't write democracy back into existence once bullets have replaced ballots. But what made this moment historic was not just the condemnation itself, but who was doing the condemning. For years, Africans have complained that truth only matters when it's said by Western voices. But now it was the AU, Africa's own institution, finally calling out one of its own. That shift matters. It was a declaration that African democracy would no longer wait for CNN approval or White House press briefings. Accountability had to begin at home. Still, inside AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, not everyone agreed. Some diplomats feared the report would embarrass a fellow government and weaken continental unity. Others, the younger, bolder generation, argued that unity built on silence isn't unity at all, it's complicity. The AU was standing at a crossroads between its past and its promise. To the outside world, it seemed like paperwork. To Africa, it felt like a pulse. Because the truth is, this report wasn't just about Tanzania. It was a message to every capital that thought democracy could be manipulated without consequence. It said, "We are watching now." And across the continent, people were listening. In Kenya, student groups held forums on electoral transparency. In Nigeria, activists drew parallels with their own flawed votes. In Ghana, opinion pieces hailed the AU's courage. Africa, for once, was not defined by tragedy, but by self-awareness. Yet as powerful as the report was, it had one flaw. It stopped short of action. It told the story, but didn't write the ending. And that begged the next question, whispered on the streets of Arusha and shouted in parliament halls, if the AU has spoken, then who will act? Who will take this truth and turn it into justice? That answer came from the last place anyone expected, not from governments, but from Tanzania's own opposition, ready to drag the fight to the world's highest court. Let's pause for a second to say, big thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, where Black voices, stories, and legacies are preserved and amplified. By becoming a member, you're not just supporting the channel, you're becoming part of a powerful cultural movement. Let's continue.
The party is appealing to the United Nations and the International Criminal Court to intervene. They say what happened after the election is not just police brutality. It is a coordinated state attack to silence those people who are opposing Samia Suluhu's leadership. And they have an official statement.
If the African Union's report cracked the surface, Tanzania's opposition party, CHADEMA, took a hammer to it. While most political parties in Africa licked their wounds quietly after disputed elections, Chadema did something audacious, something that made even the ruling elite nervous. They walked straight past Tanzania's own institutions, straight past the region's diplomacy, and headed directly for The Hague. The International Criminal Court, a name that makes presidents uncomfortable and citizens hopeful. For decades, African leaders had called it biased, colonial, even racist. But this time, it wasn't Europeans demanding an investigation. It was Africans, Tanzanian activists, lawyers, and grieving families, demanding justice on their own terms. That alone shifted the narrative. Chadema's petition was precise, not political theater. It contained testimony from victims' families, photographs of the dead and wounded, timestamps of arrests, and even drone footage of security forces firing into crowds. For years, Tanzanians had been told to keep quiet, that raising such matters internationally was unpatriotic. But as one human rights lawyer in Dar es Salaam put it, patriotism is not silence. It's defending your people when the law won't. You could feel the shift in the air. This wasn't an opposition whining over an election loss. This was a moral rebellion wrapped in legal form. The symbolism was massive. Africa, long accused of avoiding accountability, was now exporting its own evidence to a global court. The government, of course, reacted defensively. Officials dismissed the move as foreign meddling and accused CHADEMA of tarnishing Tanzania's image. But that argument sounded tired, because here's the irony. While the state tried to paint the ICC as a Western trap, it was ordinary Africans who were now choosing to use that same system to hold African leaders accountable. The colonized courtroom had just become an African weapon of truth. And this wasn't just about Tanzania anymore. Across Africa, people were watching and learning. Lawyers in Kenya and Malawi began discussing joint advocacy frameworks for African-led ICC submissions. Civil society networks in Nigeria and Senegal called the move a precedent in people's justice. The old hierarchy, where Western NGOs dictated what counted as a human rights crisis, was crumbling. Africans were building their own definitions of justice, but make no mistake, the path ahead was dangerous. The ICC process is slow, political, and easily manipulated. If Chadema's evidence wasn't airtight, it could be buried in bureaucracy. And if it were airtight, then Tanzania's entire ruling structure could face international scrutiny. Either way, the die had been cast. For President Samia Suluhu Hassan, this wasn't just a political headache, it was an existential threat. Because when your own citizens take you to The Hague, it's not just your government on trial, it's your legacy. So now the question hung heavy over Africa. How would Samia, the woman once praised as a reformer, navigate the storm she had helped create? Would she rise as a reconciler or fall as another leader consumed by her own power? Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Power, in Africa, rarely speaks softly, but Samia Suluhu Hassan did. When she first stepped into office after the sudden death of John Magufuli in 2021, she felt like a breath of calm after a storm. She was humble, measured, and spoke of reconciliation instead of confrontation. Many Tanzanians, and even the international community, called her leadership a new chapter. But as time passed, it became clear that power doesn't change its character just because it changes its voice. The same state machinery that once silenced dissent for Magufuli now worked quietly for her. At first, people gave her the benefit of the doubt. They said she was surrounded by Magufuli's loyalists, men who viewed democracy as a threat to control. Maybe she needed time, they thought. But elections have a way of revealing the truth that leaders try to hide. When protesters were shot, when journalists disappeared, when Chadema's offices were raided, that calm, motherly image began to fade. Still, there's something tragically human about Samia's position. It's easy to see dictators as monsters, but sometimes they begin as reformers who simply lose their way. Samia inherited a fragile system, one built on fear, not participation. Every step she took toward reform threatened the very power structure keeping her in charge. So she had two options: dismantle that system and risk losing everything, or protect it and risk losing her soul. She chose control. When the ICC petition landed on her desk, insiders say she was furious. Not because of the evidence, but because of the humiliation. Tanzanians had gone outside their borders to seek justice. Her advisors warned her that bending to the court would make her look weak. Show strength, they said. The world respects firmness. But firmness is a tricky word in African politics. it often means violence with better branding. So, instead of addressing the grievances, her government doubled down, denying everything, arresting activists, and accusing foreign media of fabricating stories. It was a classic play from an old script. Drown the truth in propaganda, and hope time buries the rest. But time, especially in the age of social media, doesn't bury. It archives. Videos of police brutality, leaked memos, and testimonies from victims kept resurfacing online like ghosts refusing to be forgotten. Samia's real dilemma isn't just political, it's moral. She stands at a crossroads between two Africas, the one that fears justice and the one that demands it. And whichever side she chooses will define her place in history. Because here's the irony. She wanted to be remembered as the woman who brought stability. But if she keeps walking this path, she may be remembered as the leader who destroyed the very trust that made Tanzania stable in the first place.
Reforms, openness, a fresh start.
We look forward to her calm and competent approach to politics.
So the question is no longer whether Samia can hold power. She clearly can. The question is whether she can hold legitimacy. And that's where the African Union's next move becomes everything. If you've ever tried walking across a rope over fire, you'll understand what the African Union is doing right now. On one side lies loyalty to its member states, the unspoken rule that Africans don't shame Africans in public. On the other side lies its credibility, the promise it made to protect democracy, human rights, and good governance. And right in the middle of that rope stands Tanzania, burning beneath the weight of both. When the AU congratulated Samia Suluhu Hassan, it was fulfilling tradition. When its observer mission declared the election undemocratic, it was fulfilling its conscience. The contradiction wasn't just political, it was philosophical. What does the AU exist for? To maintain the appearance of unity or to defend the truth that unites us? Because sometimes those two things are not the same. Inside the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, that question has divided the room. The old guard argues for patience. We must preserve stability. They say Tanzania's unrest could spiral into a regional issue, and that open criticism could invite foreign interference. But the younger generation of African diplomats, the ones shaped by social media, activism, and the memory of #EndSARS and #FeesMustFall, are done with silence. They see the AU's credibility fading every time it hides behind neutrality. If we cannot stand for justice in Tanzania, one AU official reportedly said off record, then why should anyone believe we can stand for it anywhere? And the truth is, they're right. Africa has changed. People no longer wait for statements from Addis, they make their own. Every AU press release now competes with hashtags, live videos, and leaked footage. Citizens are no longer passive listeners, they're active narrators. For the AU to remain relevant, it must evolve from a council of presidents into a conscience of people. But evolution requires risk. Publicly pressuring Samia Suluhu could fracture relationships with East African states like Uganda and Kenya, where leaders fear the precedent. Yet, avoiding that confrontation could make the AU irrelevant, a talking shop for the powerful, detached from the suffering it claims to prevent. The organization has walked this line before in Zimbabwe, Guinea, and Sudan, and every time it chose caution, it lost a little more faith from the people it represents. The irony is, the AU's founding fathers, Nkrumah, Nyerere, and Haile Selassie, built it precisely to challenge that fear. They didn't dream of an Africa that keeps quiet while its citizens bleed. They dreamed of a continent strong enough to correct itself. Tanzania's crisis isn't just a domestic issue, it's a test of whether that dream still breathes. So here's the truth. Tanzania's story isn't ending, it's beginning. This is not the fall of a nation, it's the awakening of a continent. And the question that will define the next decade is no longer whether Samia Suluhu faces trial or the AU reforms its charter. It's whether Africa, standing at this historic crossroads, will finally choose its own moral compass and never hand it away again. Because when that happens, justice won't be a borrowed idea anymore. It will be African. Do you still believe Africa's stable democracies are as stable as they look on paper? Let us know in the comments section. When leaders silence their own people, should the AU still call it sovereignty, or hypocrisy. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.